occur. So, but anyway, here we are. Welcome, Alice. Are we already recording?
Yes.
Okay. Welcome to the Board of Canvassers meeting. And I will turn the time over to the first agenda item, I believe, to Amelia Powers Gardner, our clerk auditor.
Actually, the first agenda item would be accepting the minutes from the July 21st Board of Canvassers meeting. So we should probably, let's accept the meeting minutes first before we go into the review of the summary report. Do that.
Great. Entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes as stated number 1 on our regular agenda.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 3-0. Okay. We'll turn it over to Amelia for the summary reports.
Yeah, thank you, commissioners, for being here and for participating in this Board of Canvassers. Each of you should have before you a review of the summary report for the 2020 general presidential election. This election was the largest election by far in Utah County history. We had more people register to vote in a single year than we've ever had. The vast majority of those happened towards the end of the year. We had more people cast ballots than we have ever had. In fact, we had significantly more, almost 40,000 more than we thought our high would be when we planned this year. And on top of that, our voter percentage turnout, our voter turnout was higher than we could have possibly foreseen and that we have seen in probably a generation here in Utah County. I could not be more proud of my staff and of the people of Utah County for showing up and performing and letting their voice be heard. When I ran for office, one of my goals was to improve voter turnout, knowing that the people of Utah County's voice was underrepresented on the state level because we didn't have that voter turnout. And we have turned that around, and 2020 showed an almost 90% voter turnout, which is phenomenal. So I'm going to go through some of those statistics for you really quickly. The eligible registered voters, we ended with 326,485. When we reached 300,000, we thought that was a fantastic milestone. We printed off a banner and put a sign in the lobby thinking that we wouldn't get higher than that, and we continued to go 26,000 more. By mail ballots sent out, now we sent out 337,191. You look at that and say, why did we send out 10,000 more than we had registered voters? Because we had a lot of people whose ballot was in maybe the second wave who got antsy because their ballot didn't show up the first day ballots could show up. So they called us, asked us to spoil their first ballot and send a new one. Or we have individuals who updated their voter address. When their neighbors and friends started receiving ballots in the mail, they realized that when their ballot didn't come, that they had moved since they had registered to vote and they hadn't updated their address in the voter registration system or with the DMV and triggered our system. So then those people went and updated their information, and then we spoiled their first ballot and sent them another one. So we had, you can see, about 10,000 people that did that in this election. That's not an unusually large number of people, especially in a year like this, a presidential year where you're going to have more people voting than have typically voted in other years. So the total ballots counted. Now, this is a little bit lower than ballots received because we did have...
Amelia?
Yeah? Yes?
Can I just ask on that, do you have a sense for how that compares to prior years? Because I don't know if folks have a sense of benchmarking. 10,000, in some ways you might say that's a lot. And so I don't know whether on a percentage of total votes cast or even just what Utah County has had historically, if you can put some context on that.
Yeah, so this number is the number of ballots that we resent to people. And that's going to be higher than previous years because we had more voter engagement than previous years. So we had a lot more people that were interested in voting this year because it was a presidential year and it was a high voter turnout that hadn't updated their voter registration. But that's a good thing because that increases the number of people that participated in the election. So it was a little higher, but so was our voter percentage turnout, and those two correlate. They go right together on that, for that one. So
Got it.
the next
Got
one is-
it. I think I was asking more of this next one because I had reviewed it. It's a similar number. It's 10 or
Right,
11,000.
yeah, it's very similar. I think I know which one you're talking about, and I'll highlight that when we get to that one. So the number of total votes counted, we actually received back more than this, but there were some votes that were found invalid, and we're going to go through those. But the total votes counted in this election was 291,159 for a total voter turnout of counted ballots for 89.18%. So all of our numbers, we had figured we'd get about 250,000 ballots back this election. We got 292,000 back. We were able to count 291,159 of those. Once again, huge voter turnout. In-person voting, we had 9,454 people who voted in person at the polls. And that's really low, which is fantastic. What that means, this is less than half. We had about 22,000 people vote at the polls in 2018. We had less voters, we had less people vote, and we had over twice as many people vote at the polls in 2018. What this shows is that our voters who wanted to vote got a ballot in the mail and they had a secure way to return it. Many of those people that showed up to vote in 2018 at the polls never received their ballot in the mail, or they didn't have a secure way to return it. This shows that we have updated our voter rolls, that we have accurate voter rolls, and that the people like the drop boxes, that they feel secure returning those ballots through drop boxes. So we had significantly higher voter turnout and less people that voted at the polls. It's a big win for the work that we've done. We had just over 1,200 people who updated their address on election day. These are people that didn't get the clue when their neighbors got a ballot and they didn't, that they had an outdated address. They went to the polls and updated that on the day of the election. 127 people who changed their name at the polls. So those are people, mostly women who have been married and they changed their last name at the polls on election day so that their ballot reflected their current name. Cure letters. These are people who either didn't sign their ballot or their signature did not match. We had 2,195. So really close to just under 1% of the people, the signature did not match. Of those, we had 1,271 people reply to those cure letters so that we could figure out why their signature didn't match, and we were able to count their ballot. That's almost 60% of the people whose ballot didn't initially match. We were able to go through and match that.
So, question on that. The sent letter
email.
one is a physical letter,
Right.
and the
email
cure-
one we did as well.
So you add those two numbers together?
No.
No?
So the email we did in addition to the letter sent. So if we had an email address available for someone whose signature didn't match, we mailed them a physical letter and
send an email?
sent an email to them. So almost 60% of the people received minimum 2 forms of communication from the county, a physical letter and an email. And then the ballots cured, we had 1,498 people whose signature we were able to then verify. So a significant portion of the signatures who didn't match, we were able to then move forward and cure their signatures and count their ballots.
And that's on the ones that you sent out, because the 2,812 is not a part. I mean, you don't add the 1,400 and the 2,800 together.
No.
Okay.
So those, some of the next line, ballots by mail not accepted, some of those were because of a signature didn't match. So returned unsigned, signature didn't match. You see those numbers. One of them, ballot only, no envelope or affidavit. There were literally people who filled out their ballot and stuck it in a drop box, not in an envelope.
I was going to say how they get there.
Right.
If it's in
We mailed it to
Dropbox.
them.
Yeah.
and then they put it in the ballot drop box with no envelope, and we can't count those. So there were 63 of those. We had 660 that the postmark was after the deadline, so we couldn't count those.
Yeah, that was kind of confusing because of the,
Right.
because of the primary.
Because of the primary.
Yeah.
Which I urged the legislature to keep it consistent.
Yeah.
Either do one or the other, but keep it consistent. So that did cause some confusion, and that meant that 660 people's votes didn't get counted because they returned them after the deadline. Absolutely. So those were mostly the mail ballots. Let's talk about the last one, the global mobile signatures returned. Utah County has for several elections now utilized a system that you can use your phone to cure your ballot. It's a text program where we send you the letter, we send you the email. It tells you how to utilize your phone to sign that, and we can verify your identity and your signature on your phone. That saves so much time and energy. It is it's one of the technological things that we implemented and has really put us a class above other folks. We had, as you can see, about half of the people who cured their ballots utilized this technology to do that. That reduces our work significantly. So that's a fantastic thing to see that such a high percentage of the folks used that. So online ballots sent. These are our overseas, military, and disabled. Those we sent 1,594 of those. When people are eligible, when UCAVA or disabled people are eligible for these, we let them choose. Do you want an online ballot? Do you want it mailed to you? Or do you want to use email? And what you can see is the vast majority of people chose that online ballot. A few chose to have it snail mail to them. We were able to count 882 of those online ballots that were returned to us. Emergency ballots issued. This is, oftentimes this is someone who's like a caretaker for a disabled person, but they want a paper ballot. They'll come into our office and we'll physically give them what's an emergency paper ballot with a replacement envelope. We issued 85 of those. Provisional ballots, most of these are going to be same-day voter registration or a change of address on election day. There were 7,157 of these. Once again, that's a very small number compared to what you would see with voter turnout like this. What that shows is that we did a lot of work ensuring that people that were eligible to vote knew they were eligible and had an opportunity to register to vote ahead of time. Of those provisional ballots, we were able to accept 6,458. We had about a 90% acceptance rate. The ones that we didn't accept, you can see the breakdown. There wasn't complete information on the form. Maybe they had already voted or they were out of the county. They forgot to come into our office and show ID. So with that, if you show up at the polls on election day and you don't have your ID, you don't have your driver's license, we'll let you cast a provisional ballot, and then you have a deadline to bring your ID into our office, and we'll hold that ballot and then show us your ID. And if people didn't do that, we couldn't count those. We had 59 of those. 259 where we couldn't prove their residency, and 13 were spoiled provisionals. Once again, a very high acceptance rate. We're working really hard to make sure that every eligible voter in Utah County, regardless of their circumstances, has the opportunity to vote, and it's showing in our numbers. We had a very small percentage of damaged ballots, about 1/3 of 1% for damaged ballots. Ballots counted on or before Election Day, 211,377. 73% of all of our ballots were proven and scanned before Election Day. The reason this number is really fun is because 2016 was previously the largest election in Utah County history, and we processed 205,000 ballots in that election. Before Election Day, we had already scanned more ballots than our largest previous record. So that's Utah is ahead of a lot of the rest of the nation that allows us to prep those ballots, prove those ballots, and scan those ballots prior to Election Day. And that allows us to get our results out faster than some of the other states that are currently still struggling. So ballots counted after Election Day, 79,782. So this is the number, Tanner, that I think you were referencing. These are ballots returned as undeliverable by the United States Postal Service. And it was 13,089 ballots were returned to sender from the U.S. Postal Service. That is 3.88%. Now, the reason this is such a fantastic number is because nationally, the average is between 10 and 11%, but a good county can get it down to 5%. A county like ours that has 2 major universities, over 60,000 what are considered migrant voters because university students tend to move often, typically it's unheard of to see a county with a demographic like ours that has that number below 5%. And we were able to get that number below 5%, which shows that the work that our team has done, the tireless efforts for the last 23 months of cleaning up these voter rolls and ensuring that only registered, active, eligible voters are on our rolls, has shown to be true and accurate, and all of that effort has been well worth it. Last year, I specifically asked for money in my budget to update these numbers so that we could reduce this. I think I asked for around $70,000 for this effort. Each one of these ballot packets typically costs around $2 to send out. We had 13,000 come back to us. In 2018, they had over 30,000 come back. And in that year, they had less registered voters. We had more registered voters. We sent out easily 50,000 more ballots than they did, and we had a third the return to sender rate as they did. And that saved our county tens of thousands of dollars.
Do you cross-tabulate that number or those undeliverables with who shows up on a provisional basis or in person?
Yeah, so what happens when those come back to sender, we make those voters an inactive voter. If it gets returned to sender, so that we're not sending them a ballot again next year.
Yeah.
Now, those
They
voters.
could have cured it, right, if they would have came in person and voted.
No, those return to sender means that the ballot was never filled out.
That's what I mean. So what happens if they would have showed up?
In
said-
person?
In person, said, oh, I didn't get a ballot, so they went in person and
So when they
voted.
showed up in person, we will still show that they were a registered voter and they will be issued a ballot, but we'll be able to see if the ballot was returned to sender. Often the reason is because they moved. So when they show up at the polls on election day, we can change their address at the polls on election day. We actually had, and that's one of the numbers I covered, 1,238
Yeah,
people.
I'm just wondering how many of those possibly cross-tabulate with the return to sender.
Probably,
There's probably
on
gonna be
those,
some.
my guess would be all of them. Because those people were registered active voters, which means that we would have sent out a ballot for them. And then they went and changed their address at the polls on election day.
I see.
So
Okay.
every one of those 1,238 people was a registered active voter. We sent them a ballot, and then, of course, it went to their old address because they hadn't updated their address. They went to the polls on election day and were then able to cast their ballot and update their voter rolls so that next year, when we send them a ballot, it goes to the right address.
Right.
I really can't focus on this one enough. It saves our county tens of thousands of dollars. This is the work that my staff does year round, whether it's a presidential year or a municipal year, whether it's February or November. This is the work they're doing. It saves us money, and more importantly, it gives us accurate, updated voter rolls, which increases the security of our election. This is a huge win for our office. Our goal was to get it below 5%, and we got it significantly below that with 3.8%. I'm very proud of the work we did. Thank you for facilitating that work by approving our budget request last year in order to be able to facilitate that work. Do you guys have any other questions on that one before I move on? Thank you. Audits, we audit 1,000 ballots and 1,000 signatures. And what that audit includes is actually getting the paper ballots and auditing the paper ballots so that we can ensure that our processes are true and have integrity. This is a risk limiting audit. It's a random batch of ballots and a random batch of signatures that we get from the state. The state gives us those random numbers and then we audit those by hand. That audit is complete.
Did you find any discrepancies there?
No, we did not find any discrepancies. Then the last two numbers, again, I'm quite excited about. This is total ballots received from the post office, 54,184. Total ballots received from drop boxes, 236,975. So we talk a lot about mail-in ballots. We talk a lot about the chain of custody, and a lot of people are concerned that mail-in ballots are not secure because of that chain of custody. What's important for people to recognize is that here in our county, over 80% of our ballots retained a chain of custody with the election officials, and they utilized our drop boxes. Over 80%. 2 years ago in 2018, Utah County had 0 countywide drop boxes that were permanently located in our city's parking lots. We now have 19. Those 19 drop boxes cost our county right around $60,000. However, every ballot returned through the postal system costs us just right at about $1 to pay return postage on that ballot. So we spent $60,000 on drop boxes over the last 2 years, and in this one election, it saved us $237,000. Once again, thank you. Thank you for trusting us enough when we asked for $60,000 to put in drop boxes, and we have used, we have our voter outreach coordinator. That's a new position that you approved this year. He worked tirelessly as the voter outreach coordinator to reach out to the cities, to the voters, through social media, through the print media and the news media, and through other means to ensure that our citizens knew that they had a secure way to return those ballots. And the money and the investment that we put into placing these in the cities and educating our people has saved our county in this one election $237,000.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. I got a question for you, though, on this, too. When it comes to those that are received from the post office, was that all come back through? I mean, I know it's postage paid. It's paid by the county to come back. Did anybody put stamps on it or anything like that?
You do get a
Was
handful
there-
that have stamps on them.
And it cost them $1 to send it back?
Here's the thing, they typically put one stamp on it, but one stamp's not enough to send it. But the post office will deliver it to us anyway.
Okay. Because if it's costing, if we're saving $1, I was just assuming that it was probably $1 worth of stamps, which I can't
No,
imagine
most
doing
people
that.
don't realize that because ballot envelopes are a little different. They're not quite the same
Yeah.
size, but that's on purpose because we custom make them. We don't want them to be the same
Right.
size as everything else so that you could make them.
Question, oh, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I was gonna say, so people would put a stamp on it, and we had a handful of those, but the post office delivers them anyway.
And I'm guessing you probably have no idea of knowing this, but I would just be curious, of the 54,000 that were sent by mail, like, how many of those would, like, missionaries, service members, people living outside of the state temporarily that are mailing their ballot back in?
Well, as far as service members goes, not that many because we had less than 200 that we actually mailed ballots to because the rest of them used their phone. So that saved us quite a bit. Those ones cost a bit more than $1. But as far as people outside of Utah County, those would be more considered absentee voters. Do we have, where's Rosa? Do we have the number on that? Do you have a ballpark? About 20,000? Yeah, 20 to
And
25,000,
that
so
would
about
be-
half.
So that would be included in the 54.
Right,
then.
that is correct. So about half of that returned through the post office are people that really needed to use the post office because they
Right,
don't live in our
they needed
county.
to. And that, the reason for that question was, I was just curious, you know, how many of those really needed to use the post office and would have done it?
But even then,
Otherwise, and then-
the other 10,000, we don't know if it's somebody who's homebound,
Right.
right? So it really is, the vast majority of our citizens are utilizing the drop boxes that we put in place. It's saving us a ton of money. It's ensuring the security of our elections. It's maintaining the integrity of the chain of custody of a voted ballot.
Great, thank you.
A great win. So that's the overview of the summary sheet. That doesn't include the results, which of course, everybody is here for the results. I'm a numbers person, I'm a nerd, I've said it before, so I like the statistics. Thank you for letting me go through those in depth with you. I think it's important that we recognize the amazing work that our team here has done and that it shows in the numbers. It's not just a sense that I feel they did well. It is widely recognized by the media. It is widely recognized by the candidates on all political spectrums, and the numbers don't lie. They show that this team has done phenomenal work and that Utah County is truly a world-class elections office.
Well, and I want to acknowledge that. Obviously, as we turn to the results, that's kind of more of a report of what did the people in our county decide? What did they choose? But this initial report is what was the work that was done by your office to ensure a free and fair election, and one that we can trust, one that has allowed convenience for our voters, that facilitated an incredibly high voter turnout. So thank you. There's been a lot of attention in the news of how high Utah County voter turnout, may have affected races, but I think the bigger thing is that's just a positive thing for our community, for people to know that their vote is counted and to know where to vote, to be able to have so many options available to them. This is incredible work, and it's your whole team deserves a lot of credit.
Yeah, I think last night before our final result for the CD4 race, the Congressional District 4 race, it showed that there was an increase of 78% in voters from Utah County in CD4, and that was before our final release. My guess is it's probably pretty close to 80% increase in Utah County voters in that 4th Congressional District race. That is a phenomenal, now of course we've had an increase in population, but we've worked very hard to ensure that every eligible voter, especially those in new growth areas, were able to have an opportunity to register to vote and had registered to vote. And it showed in that.
Now, let me ask you a question on, there's a national conversation happening about trusting results and how transparent is the process. So without getting into that national conversation, at least here in Utah County, how can our residents, our voters know that the results here are auditable and transparent? What have you done to make sure that we can feel good about our election results?
That's a fantastic question. Thank you for asking it. One of the things that I ran on when I ran for this office was transparency. And it's not uncommon for people to ask, you're a member of a political party, how do we have trust in your process? And what I told people is, I myself am a Republican. But if a Bernie Sanders leaning Democrat were to hold my office, I want the processes that I put into place, that I, as a Calvin Coolidge, Ronald Reagan Republican, I will have confidence in the results of these elections. So I wanted to put as much transparency as I could so that when I'm no longer the clerk auditor of Utah County, I can cast my vote as a Barry Goldwater Republican and know that regardless of the political affiliation or ideology of the clerk, that my vote was counted correctly. And in order to facilitate that, we did the opposite of what you see happening on a national stage. I saw on Twitter there was an election center, I think it was in like Detroit or Philadelphia, where they were literally putting shades up over the windows so that people outside couldn't see the work they were doing. And if you juxtapose that with the ballot center that sits right below us here in this chamber, I literally had our Public Works Department cut holes in the walls and install windows, so that any citizen in that public lobby could come and watch all of the work we do. And then we placed all of our most critical processes, tabulation, adjudication, and initial scanning. We placed those processes in front of those windows so that any news camera, any candidate, any political party, or any citizen can come and see the work we do at all times. Not only on election night, but leading up to the election as well as on election night. We welcomed the local, the state, and the national media into our office. We had news crews doing live feeds from our ballot center inside on election night. We had the Washington Post follow us for 2 weeks and outline our process. And we allowed poll workers, poll watchers, candidates, attorneys for candidates, political parties, and frankly, everyone through homeschool groups to curious public members come through our office. We give them tours, we let them see our process, we answer every question, and we let them document it. Because I truly believe that the more transparency we have in our election systems in this country, the more confidence we can have in the results. As an election official, I do not see any reason to hide what we do in any aspect from a political party, a candidate, the media, or the public. And I've implemented that and infused that in what we do. When we have active ballots in our ballot center, we have 24/7 cameras. We have alarm systems, and we have windows, and everybody is welcome to come.
Thank you.
So let's move on to the results. That's the funnest part. We should have a copy of our results. Roseanne, were we able to give them? Okay, you guys have got those. So do you have any specific questions about those? What you'll see in those results, there will be a time, for example, in a race where you'll see that there were less votes or less ballots counted in that race than there are people who actually voted. Those are called undervotes, or they could be overvotes, where they didn't vote in that race or they voted for more than one person in that race, and a minimum of 2 election judges were not able to discern what their intent was in that race. It's not uncommon to have people skip things on the ballot that they don't know or don't understand.
So just for, and I appreciate this because the transparency thing is a great thing. But just for anybody who's watching, what is typical in your process where you have 2 election judges looking at it to where they probably would not be able to decipher what the intent of the voter was? Can I give an example of what that would be?
An example of that, if there are 2 bubbles filled in and one of them isn't crossed out or one of them isn't circled, then we don't know which person they were intending to vote for. At that point, typically you always have a minimum of 2 people sitting there. If the 2 people agree, it's really easy. If both of them are thinking it's one way, but they want a third check, they can bring in a third judge and say, what do you think? And if that third judge agrees with them, then we're going to go with that. If they don't agree on what the intent is, and a third person also doesn't help that situation, then we're just going to not count that vote. That's very rare. We look for reasons to count people's votes. So it's not uncommon for people to change their mind. They've got their ballot, they fill it out, they cross out one, they circle the other. We know what they meant. If we can discern intent, we're going to count that vote.
Because when I saw the process, sometimes somebody will place their pen on a bubble,
Right.
not necessarily mark it, and then they actually mark, or they place a pen again,
Right.
and then they
Yeah, so
actually
we
mark.
typically call that a pen rest. And what they'll have is as they're reading the names, maybe they're deciding, I think I might want this person. So they put their pen on that one and it leaves just a little mark.
Yeah.
That little mark, our computer screens will pick up and it'll throw that ballot to what's called adjudication. And at that point, we have somebody physically look at it, and it's typically pretty easy to see, oh, that's just a pen rest. They didn't actually fill in that oval, but this other one, the oval is filled in, and every other race, they actually filled in the oval. So we're pretty confident that they meant to vote for the person whose oval they filled in. Sometimes they put check marks. Some people have never taken a Scantron test and don't know how to read instructions, and they check mark every one of their choices.
So the one that I saw and I'm glad I'm not a judge in it, they circled it, and then they filled one in.
That would be interesting to see what the judges chose.
Right.
But what you would do on that one is you would look to see all the other
How they did it.
races.
Yep.
Because if they filled in the circle on every one of their other races, then that's the intent we're gonna go with because it matches the pattern of all their other races. You're typically not gonna change the way you vote on one race out of, 20. Okay, do you guys have any questions on those results? Okay, so what we'll ask you to do then is to accept those results. So I guess the next two steps of this are you accept that summary report that we gave you, and then the next agenda item is to authorize the chair to sign that so that we can send that up to the state.
I actually think there's a clarification. It's all three of us that need to sign that.
Correct, that is true.
So.
So you all sign, and I have to sign it as well. The three of you and me, we all sign it and send it up to the state. But we do need to vote on that. You need to accept the results first, and then we vote to have us sign it and send it to the state.
So I'll make a motion that we have reviewed the November 3rd, 2020 election summary report as stated number 2.
Second?
We have a motion and a second that we've reviewed it. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. It passes 3-0.
I'll make a motion that we adopt the November 3rd, 2020 election summary report including the certificate of all votes cast.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to adopt as stated for number 3. All in favor, say aye.
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 It passes 3-0.
I'll make a motion that we adopt and authorize the chair, or all three of us, plus the clerk auditor, of the Board of Canvassers to sign the November 3rd, 2020 election certified report.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to adopt and authorize all three of us and the clerk auditor to sign this report as stated for number 4. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It passes unanimously.
Fantastic, thank you. So I guess if people have questions, I can entertain any questions from the public.
If there's any public comment or public questions.
Hi, I'm Lisa Shepard from Provo, and I have toured the previous clerk's voting center, and I have toured this one. And I have to tell you that I am extremely impressed with the processes that we have. I have been on several tours. I have stood there and poll watched, and I just have to compliment the department and all of the friendly people who always give me a smiling face every time I walk in the room. Thank you for that. I would also like to say that I am very thankful that we can look to Utah County as a model for any type of mail-in voting. And part of the reason why is I just experienced in Clark County in Nevada, where the ballots were sent to people in a primary that were rejected because they were undeliverable. They were returned back to the clerk, but for the general election, they were cast. So I had a group of volunteers, and we went and we did some research on that by knocking on doors. And the amount of discrepancies between what we consider a legal ballot compared to a non-legal ballot, the percentages were about 80% from the list that we had. So I am just wanting to let anybody that has to hear this know that Utah County is definitely a world model, and thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Is there any additional public comment? Okay. Seeing none, I'll entertain a final motion.
Well, maybe for the final motion, I'd just like to clap for well done. You did a great job. Now I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, we are adjourned.